My name is Serena and I'm 32. One Saturday evening, I found myself at my father's lavish retirement gala at the city's most prestigious yacht club. 200 of the city's elite were there, draped in couture and bespoke suits. I felt horribly exposed in my simple dress, a stark contrast to the opulent setting. My father had just concluded his thank you speech, reflecting on his 40-year career, when his eyes landed on me. What he said next would forever alter our relationship. Standing there, holding my glass of sparkling cider, I knew what I would do. If you've ever felt like the odd one out, give this a like. Subscribe for more true stories about family bonds. To understand this night, you have to understand my family. The Blackwoods are a pillar of the city. My grandfather built the foundation with a small carpentry shop that evolved into a property empire. My father, Harrison, turned 65, dedicated his life as CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. My mother, Eleanor, is 62, a devoted society wife. Eleanor chairs charities and hosts elaborate dinner parties that are often featured in social magazines. Then there is my older brother, Julian, 35, who is everything my parents wanted. He graduated summa cum laude from Yale Law, worked at a prominent law firm for 10 years, and became a partner. Julian has always been the golden child, the successor to the family business when Dad stepped down. He married his sweetheart, Bethany, and they live in a huge house near our childhood home. Then there's me. Since I could hold a crayon, I was drawing. While Julian played with trucks and discussed building, I would sketch flowers or design strange houses, nothing like our family's profitable buildings. When kids my age were playing sports or music, I wanted art classes. My parents agreed, thinking it would fade. But it never did. In high school, while Julian was president of the student council, I was the artist in the corner, working until the janitor kicked me out. My counselor suggested art school, but my parents forbade it. They wanted business or law, something practical for the family firm. The fight began when I was 17. I wanted graphic design at the state university, and they wanted business administration. After months of fighting, we compromised. I could minor in art if I majored in marketing. They thought marketing was creative and useful for the business. College was the first time I could breathe. Marketing was tolerable, but art was where I thrived. I spent all my time in the computer lab learning Photoshop and Illustrator, making designs my professors said were promising. During my junior year, I started freelancing. What started as extra money became more. After graduation, my parents expected me to work at Blackwood Enterprises. Instead, I said I wanted to do graphic design. Their disappointment was crushing, but I couldn't sell buildings I didn't care about. They gave me a year to get it out of my system before joining the family business. That year turned into 11. I built a successful freelance graphic design business, working with small businesses and startups. I wasn't making Blackwood Enterprises money, but I paid my bills. My parents tolerated it, introducing me as their daughter who does art on the side. They hoped I would come to my senses. The tension simmered. Sunday dinners became diplomatic exercises. Julian talked about his cases, while I sat silently, knowing my work would be met with polite smiles. I felt like a stranger, not fitting the mold they'd created for the Blackwood legacy. 3 months before my father's party, things exploded. He called a meeting. Julian and I sat in Dad's office, surrounded by awards while Mom served coffee in fine china. Dad announced he was retiring at the end of the year. The transition was simple. Julian would take over as CEO, and the board had approved it. Then Dad turned to me with what he called an exciting opportunity. He wanted me to be director of marketing, overseeing advertising, branding, and public relations. The salary was more than double what I made freelancing, plus benefits and stock options. It was an incredible offer. I should have been grateful. I should have jumped at the chance to be included in the family business, using my skills. But sitting there, all I could think about was the creative freedom I'd lose. Blackwood Enterprises marketing was traditional, focused on established wealth. There would be no room for my designs. I told them I needed to think about it. Dad's face darkened. Think about what, Serena? This is what you've been working towards. It's creative, and it's a chance to finally contribute. I tried to explain that my freelance work was fulfilling, that I wasn't sure corporate life was right for me. Julian tried to play peacemaker, suggesting we structure the role to allow outside projects. But Dad cut him off. You've had 11 years to play artist, he said, his voice louder. It's time to grow up. This family has given you everything, and you've contributed nothing. Nothing hit me hard. I thought about the award-winning campaign I'd created for the Children's Hospital, the brand identity I'd developed for 3 different nonprofits, the small businesses I'd helped establish their presence. But in Dad's eyes, none of that mattered because it didn't directly benefit Blackwood Enterprises. I stood up and told them I couldn't accept the position. The silence was deafening. Mom's cup rattled. Julian stared at his hands. Dad's face went red. You're making a mistake, Serena. A selfish, short-sighted mistake. But don't think you can crawl back when your little art hobby stops paying the bills. I left that meeting feeling more isolated than ever. Over the following weeks, the house felt different. Conversations stopped when I entered. My parents were civil but cold. Julian tried to bridge the gap, calling me regularly to see if I'd reconsidered, but even his attempts at reconciliation felt like pressure to conform. The retirement party planning became a symbol of my outsider status. Mom involved Julian in every decision. When I offered to design the invitations, she politely declined, saying they'd already hired a firm. I wasn't asked to give a speech, wasn't included in the planning committee, and wasn't even consulted about the guest list. 2 weeks before the party, I received my formal invitation in the mail. It was addressed to Ms. Serena Blackwood in the same impersonal font used for all the other guests. There was no personal note from Mom, no family dinner invitation, just the standard invitation with RSVP instructions that I almost didn't go. I spent several nights staring at that invitation, wondering if my presence would make the evening better or worse for everyone involved, but something inside me refused to let them write me off completely. Despite everything, this was still my father's retirement, a milestone in his life that I'd been part of by proximity, if not by choice. I decided to attend, hoping that maybe the celebratory atmosphere would soften everyone's hearts, and we could begin to repair the damage. The morning of the retirement party, I stood in front of my closet for over an hour trying to decide what to wear. Every dress felt like a statement I wasn't sure I wanted to make. Too formal, and I'd look like I was trying too hard to fit in. Too casual, and I'd be disrespecting the occasion. I finally settled on a simple black dress with clean lines, elegant but not flashy, appropriate but not attention-seeking. The Greenwood Yacht Club sat on the coast of the ocean with a clubhouse that looked like a European mansion. Valets in white jackets took keys from guests arriving in Mercedes, BMWs, and Teslas. I drove my modest Honda Civic, suddenly feeling underdressed despite my careful outfit selection. Inside, the main ballroom had been transformed into something from a magazine spread. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in crisp white linens and adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces. A jazz quartet played softly in one corner while servers in black uniforms circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. I recognized most of the guests from years of family social events. There was Judge Morrison, who'd officiated Julian's wedding, the Hartwell family who owned half the downtown real estate, city council members, bank presidents, and other construction company executives. These were the people who built our city's power structure, and they all seemed to know exactly where they belonged in this room. My parents stood near the entrance, greeting guests with practiced smiles. Dad wore his best tuxedo, the one he saved for the most important occasions, while Mom looked stunning in a navy blue gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They were in their element, graciously accepting congratulations and well wishes from the city's elite. When I approached them, their smiles became more strained. Mom kissed my cheek and complimented my dress, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. Dad shook my hand like I was a business acquaintance rather than his daughter. The awkwardness was palpable, and I quickly excused myself to find my assigned table. I wasn't surprised to discover I'd been seated at table 12, far from the head table where my parents and Julian would sit. My table mates were pleasant enough, mostly business associates of Dad's that I'd met at previous functions. But the conversation felt forced. They asked polite questions about my work, but I could tell they were just being courteous. When I mentioned graphic design, their eyes glazed over with the same polite disinterest I'd seen countless times before. My Aunt Susan, Dad's younger sister, found me during the cocktail hour. She'd always been the more progressive member of the Blackwood family, having scandalized everyone by becoming a social worker instead of marrying a successful businessman. "You look beautiful, honey," she said, giving me a genuine hug. How are you holding up? I appreciated her concern, but I wasn't ready to admit how isolated I felt. We chatted about her work at the domestic violence shelter and my latest design projects. She was one of the few family members who seemed genuinely interested in my career, asking thoughtful questions about my clients and creative process. You know, she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening, your dad is proud of you, even if he doesn't know how to show it. This whole retirement thing has him emotional. He's scared about letting go of control, and he's taking it out on everyone around him. I wanted to believe her, but Dad's recent behavior suggested otherwise. Still, I appreciated Susan's attempt to build bridges, even if I wasn't convinced they were structurally sound. As dinner was served, I watched my family from across the room. Julian gave a heartfelt speech about Dad's mentorship and the legacy he was leaving behind. Several business partners shared stories about Dad's integrity and vision. The mayor presented him with a key to the city, recognizing his contributions to the community's growth and development. Throughout it all, Dad beamed with pride and satisfaction. This was his night, the culmination of decades of hard work and success. I found myself genuinely happy for him despite our recent conflicts. Whatever our personal disagreements, he had built something impressive and lasting. Then it was Dad's turn to speak. He walked to the podium with the confidence of a man who'd spent 40 years commanding boardrooms and construction sites. His voice was strong and clear as he thanked his colleagues, his business partners, and the community leaders who'd supported him throughout his career. He talked about the buildings that would stand as monuments to his work, the jobs he created, and the projects that had helped shape our city skyline. He thanked Mom for her unwavering support and the elegant way she'd represented the Blackwood name in social circles. He spoke glowingly about Julian, calling him the future of Blackwood Enterprises and expressing complete confidence in his ability to lead the company forward. The room was silent, hanging on every word of this powerful man's reflection on his life's work. I felt a mix of emotions, pride in his accomplishments, tempered by the growing realization that I might not be mentioned at all in this summary of his legacy. Then his eyes found me across the room. The pause lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I could see him weighing his words, deciding how or if to acknowledge my presence. The entire room seemed to sense the tension, conversation stopping as people followed his gaze to my table. What happened next would replay in my mind for months afterward. Dad's voice cut through the silence like a knife. You know, I've been blessed with a wonderful family. My son, Julian, has made me prouder than any father has a right to be. He paused, his eyes still locked on mine. For just a moment, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe Susan was right. Maybe he was going to surprise everyone, including me, with words of acceptance and love. You're the biggest disgrace to this family. The words hit the room like a physical force. Conversations didn't just stop, they evaporated. The gentle clinking of silverware against china ceased completely. Even the jazz quartet seemed to miss a note. 200 of the city's most influential people turned in their chairs to stare at me, some with shock, others with the morbid curiosity of witnesses to a car accident. I felt the blood drain from my face as every eye in the room focused on me. At the head table, Julian had gone pale, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. Mom's hand was pressed to her chest, her face a mask of horror at the public humiliation her husband had just unleashed. But Dad wasn't finished. 11 years, he continued, his voice gaining strength from the crowd's attention. 11 years I've waited for you to grow up and contribute something meaningful to this family. Instead, you waste your time with finger paints and computer games while your brother builds a real career. The silence in the room was suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as I sat frozen in my chair. This wasn't just a private family disagreement anymore. Dad had chosen to humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered in our social circle, ensuring that this moment would be whispered about in yacht club dining rooms for months to come. Part of me wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. The shame was overwhelming, a burning sensation that started in my chest and spread outward until my entire body felt like it was on fire. But as I looked around at the faces staring at me, some pitying, some judgmental, some just curious about how this family drama would unfold, something else started building inside me. Anger. Pure, clean anger that cut through the shame and embarrassment like a sword through fog. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, but my resolve crystallizing with each second. The sparkling cider glass in my hand felt solid and real, an anchor in the surreal nightmare this evening had become. Every eye in the room followed my movement as I rose to my full height, my black dress suddenly feeling like armor rather than a costume. "Perfect," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "Then erase me from your will, too." The effect was immediate and devastating. Dad's face went from triumphant to shocked in the span of a heartbeat. The cider glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the podium with a sound like a gunshot in the silence. Pieces of crystal scattered in all directions, and the golden liquid spread across the white marble like spilled sunshine. But I wasn't done. 11 years of polite silence, of swallowed pride, of pretending that my work didn't matter, came pouring out in a flood of words. "You want to know what I've contributed to this family? I've contributed my silence while you've spent 11 years telling everyone who'll listen that I'm a failure. I've contributed my presence at every family dinner where you've made it clear that my work is worthless. I've contributed my patience while you've treated my career like a hobby that I should have outgrown by now." The room was so quiet, I could hear people breathing. Someone's phone was buzzing on a table somewhere, but no one moved to answer it. All attention was focused on this unexpected showdown between father and daughter. "I've built a business from nothing," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I've won awards for my work. I've helped nonprofits raise hundreds of thousands of dollars with campaigns I created. I've given small businesses the professional image they needed to compete with corporations. But none of that matters to you because it doesn't say Blackwood Enterprises on the letterhead." Julian started to stand, probably hoping to intervene and salvage what was left of the evening, but I held up my hand to stop him. This was my moment, and I was going to take it. "You know what the real disgrace is? It's not that I chose art over construction. It's that you've spent my entire adult life trying to make me feel ashamed of work that brings me joy and helps other people. It's that you'd rather have a miserable daughter working in your company than a happy daughter succeeding on her own terms." Dad found his voice, but it came out as a croak. "Serena, you're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You just called your own daughter a disgrace in front of 200 people, and you're worried about me making a scene?" The crowd was completely captivated. Now, this wasn't just family drama. This was theater, raw and unscripted and impossible to look away from. I could see people taking out their phones, probably recording videos that would be shared in group chats before the evening was over. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, raising my sparkling cider glass like I was making a toast. "I'm going to walk out of here, and I'm going to build the most successful design firm this city has ever seen. And when I do, when my name is in the newspaper for all the right reasons, remember that you had the chance to be proud of me instead of ashamed of me." I drained my cider glass in one gulp and set it down on the table with a sharp click that seemed to echo in the silence. "Congratulations on your retirement, Dad. I hope it brings you everything you deserve." With that, I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor in a steady rhythm that sounded like a countdown. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a clear path to the door. No one spoke. No one moved to stop me. Even the servers had frozen in place, silver trays balanced in their hands as they watched this family implode in real time. Just before I reached the door, I turned back one last time. Dad was still standing at the podium, looking smaller somehow than he had just minutes before. Mom had her face in her hands. Julian was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Oh, and one more thing," I called back across the silent ballroom. "Send my regards to whatever marketing firm you hire to replace me." Then I walked out into the night, leaving behind 40 years of family expectations and stepping into something entirely unknown. I don't remember driving home. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my apartment kitchen at 2 a.m, still wearing my black dress, staring at my phone as it lit up with call after call. Julian's name appeared on the screen over and over, interspersed with calls from various aunts, uncles, and family friends who'd witnessed the meltdown. I let them all go to voicemail. The adrenaline that had carried me through my confrontation with Dad was wearing off, replaced by a hollow feeling in my chest. What had I done? In the span of 5 minutes, I'd essentially severed ties with my entire family in the most public way possible. By tomorrow morning, everyone in our social circle would know about the Blackwood family scandal. My laptop was open on the kitchen counter, showing my email inbox filled with notifications. Word traveled fast in our connected world, and several of my current clients had already reached out after seeing videos of the incident on social media. The footage was grainy, and the audio wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to capture the general outline of what had happened. Julian kept calling until I finally answered at 3 in the morning. "Serena, thank God. Where are you? Are you okay?" His voice was strained, exhausted. I could hear Bethany in the background asking if I was safe. "I'm fine, Julian. I'm at home. We need to talk. This whole thing got out of hand, but we can fix it. Dad was just what?" I interrupted. "Just having a bad night. Just emotional about retirement. Just accidentally called me a disgrace in front of 200 people. Julian sighed heavily. "He was wrong, Serena. What he said was completely out of line, but you have to understand he's been under a lot of stress with the transition, and he's worried about the company's future." "Just stop!" I cut him off again. "Just stop making excuses for him. You've been doing it our entire lives, and I'm tired of it." Dad said exactly what he meant to say. "He thinks I'm a disgrace. And honestly, Julian, maybe he's right. Don't say that. You're not a disgrace. You're talented and successful and... Successful." I laughed bitterly. "According to who? I'm 32 years old. I rent a one-bedroom apartment, and I drive a 12-year-old Honda. In Dad's world, in our family's world, that's not success. That's failure with a college degree." We talked for another hour with Julian, trying to convince me to come to Sunday dinner so we could all talk things through. But I knew there was no going back from what had happened. Dad had drawn a line in the sand, and I'd not only crossed it, I'd erased it completely. Over the next few days, my phone rang constantly. Reporters from the local newspaper wanted to interview me about the Blackwood family incident. Friends from high school reached out after seeing the videos on Facebook. Even strangers were commenting on articles about the story, debating whether I was brave or disrespectful. But it was the business calls that surprised me the most. 3 different companies reached out within the first week asking if I was available for consulting work. Apparently, my public stand against family pressure had resonated with other entrepreneurs who valued independence over conformity. The most interesting call came from David Chun, the CEO of TechForward, a rapidly growing software company that had been trying to break into the local market. He'd seen the coverage of Dad's retirement party and was impressed by what he called my authentic passion for creative work. "I've been looking for a design partner who understands what it means to build something from scratch," he said during our phone conversation. "Someone who's not afraid to take risks and who won't try to make us look like every other tech company in the market." We met for coffee that Friday, and I knew within 10 minutes that this was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. David was young, ambitious, and completely unimpressed by old money connections or family names. He cared about results, innovation, and creating products that actually help people. "I want to offer you a 6-month contract to overhaul our entire brand identity," he said. "Logo, website, marketing materials, everything. It's a big project, bigger than anything you've probably handled before, but I think you're ready for it." The contract he offered was worth more than I typically made in an entire year. It was also the kind of creative challenge I dreamed about, working with a company that wanted to stand out rather than blend in. I signed the contract that afternoon. For the first time since Dad's retirement party, I felt like I could breathe properly. This wasn't just a new client. It was validation that my work had value beyond my family's opinion of it. Someone was willing to bet significant money on my ability to deliver results. That weekend, I started sketching ideas for TechForward's new brand identity. The creative energy that had been suppressed for months came flooding back, and I found myself working until 2 in the morning, not because I had to, but because I was genuinely excited about what I was creating. Mom called that Sunday, her voice careful and formal. "Serena, I think we should talk." We met at a quiet cafe downtown, neutral territory where neither of us had the home field advantage. Mom looked tired, older somehow than she had just a week before. The scandal had taken its toll on the entire family. "Your father is sorry," she said without preamble. "He knows he handled things badly. Is he sorry, or are you sorry for him?" I asked. Mom's composure cracked slightly. "He's too proud to apologize directly, but he's been miserable since the party. He didn't mean for things to go that far." I studied my mother's face, looking for signs of genuine remorse rather than damage control. "Mom, did you agree with what he said?" She was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee with mechanical precision. "I think your father has very definite ideas about what success looks like, and those ideas don't leave much room for other definitions." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest thing to criticism of Dad I'd ever heard from her. "I got a new client this week," I told her. "A big contract that's going to change everything for my business." She looked up, surprised. "That's wonderful, honey. What kind of company?" For the first time in years, I told my mother about my work without feeling defensive or apologetic. I explained the Tech Forward project, the creative challenges it presented, and my vision for their new brand identity. She listened without the glazed expression I was used to seeing when I discussed my career. "You sound happy," she said when I finished. "I am happy. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." We parted with a tentative hug and a promise to stay in touch. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. 6 months later, I was standing in the empty office space that would become Creative Haven, my own design studio. The Tech Forward project had been an overwhelming success, leading to 3 more major contracts and enough revenue to make the leap from freelancing to running an actual business. The space was raw and industrial, with exposed brick walls and large windows that let in streams of natural light. It was nothing like the polished corporate offices where Dad had built his empire. And that was exactly the point. This was going to be a place where creativity thrived, where young designers could take risks and push boundaries without worrying about conservative corporate expectations. Sarah Martinez was my first hire, a recent art school graduate with incredible talent and infectious enthusiasm. She reminded me of myself at that age, full of ideas and hungry for opportunities to prove herself. Watching her face light up when I offered her the job was like seeing my younger self get the chance I'd always wanted. "I can't believe this is real," she said, looking around the empty space. 6 months ago, I was serving coffee and wondering if I'd ever use my degree. Now, I'm going to be working on actual campaigns for actual companies. We spent the afternoon planning the office layout, discussing equipment needs, and brainstorming the kind of company culture we wanted to create. It was the opposite of every corporate environment I'd ever experienced, built on collaboration rather than hierarchy, innovation rather than tradition. The business grew faster than I'd expected. Within 3 months of opening Creative Haven, we had 5 employees and a waiting list of potential clients. The work was diverse and challenging, from nonprofit fundraising campaigns to tech startup brand development to restaurant identity packages. But the project I was most proud of was our pro bono work with the women's shelter where Aunt Susan volunteered. Their outdated materials had been limiting their fundraising efforts. So, we created a complete rebrand that helped them increase donations by 60% in their first quarter. The recognition started small with features in local business magazines and design blogs. But when Creative Haven won the Regional Small Business Innovation Award, the story made the front page of the business section. The article included quotes from our clients about the impact our work had made on their success. Dad saw the article. I knew, because Julian told me during one of our monthly coffee meetings, which had become our way of maintaining a relationship despite the ongoing family tension. "He didn't say much," Julian admitted, stirring sugar into his latte. "But he read it twice, and he left it on his desk for a week before putting it away." I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Part of me wanted Dad's approval even after everything that had happened, but a larger part of me had moved beyond needing his validation to feel successful. "How's the transition going for him?" I asked. Julian grimaced. "Not great, honestly. He's having a hard time letting go. He calls me 3 times a day with suggestions and comes to the office even though he's supposed to be retired. Mom's ready to send him on a cruise just to get him out of everyone's hair." I almost felt sorry for Dad. He'd spent 40 years being the center of his own universe, and suddenly that universe was continuing to function without him. It was probably the first time in his adult life that he wasn't essential to something's success. The conversation shifted to Julian's own struggles with leadership. Despite his legal expertise and business acumen, he was discovering that managing people was entirely different from managing cases. Some of Dad's old-school employees were resistant to his more collaborative management style, while younger hires found the company culture too rigid and traditional. I keep thinking about what you said at the retirement party, he told me, about building something that brings you joy. I'm good at this job, Serena, but I'm not sure it brings me joy. It was the first time Julian had ever admitted that the family business might not be his true calling. We talked about his interests outside of work, his secret love of photography, and his regret about never traveling before settling into his predetermined career path. You know, it's not too late to make changes, I said. The company doesn't have to define your entire life. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Easy for you to say. You already made your escape. That word escape stuck with me for days afterward. I'd never thought of leaving the family business as an escape, but maybe that's exactly what it was. I'd escaped the suffocating expectations, the constant criticism, and the requirement to fit into a mold that was never designed for someone like me. My personal life was changing, too. I'd started dating James, a freelance photographer who specialized in architectural photography. He understood the creative life in a way that my previous boyfriends, mostly other young professionals from my parents' social circle, never had. He didn't care about family connections or social status. He cared about the quality of light in a room and the story that buildings told about the people who use them. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on shared interests and mutual respect rather than social compatibility. He loved hearing about my design projects and often offered to collaborate on presentations or client pitches. For the first time in my life, I was with someone who saw my work as valuable and interesting rather than a cute hobby. The Creative Haven team was becoming like a second family, bound together by our shared commitment to doing meaningful work. We instituted Innovation Fridays, where anyone could propose experimental projects or new approaches to client challenges. The energy in the office was electric, with people staying late not because they had to, but because they were genuinely excited about what they were creating. One evening, as I was locking up the office after a particularly productive day, I realized that I couldn't remember the last time I'd thought about Dad's opinion of my work. The sting of his words at the retirement party had faded, replaced by the daily satisfaction of building something I believed in. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Just saw the article about our campaign for the Children's Hospital. My mom is so proud. She's showing it to everyone at her book club. Thanks for giving me the chance to work on something that matters.